There are moments when life seems to test the very edge of our endurance, when the familiar turns strange and the new remains shrouded in fog. We find ourselves caught between what no longer fits and a future yet undefined. But what if this isn't an end, only a signal that something greater draws near? It is not by chance that you feel unmoored, nor is it without cause that you begin releasing certain people, habits, or ways of life once thought unshakable. These are signs, and if you can recognize the 7 that follow, prepare yourself. Your life is on the verge of entering an entirely new chapter. 1. Letting go of old relationships. When fracture is a natural part of growth, there is one thing we are rarely prepared for: the loss of once cherished relationships, friends, lovers, colleagues, even family. As we begin to change, live more deliberately, and pursue inner growth, some people will no longer walk beside us. This shift often happens quietly. No arguments, no grand fallout, just a growing distance, until one day we realize they are no longer there. For many, this is a painful realization, partly because those connections once offered comfort and a sense of belonging, partly because deep down we wish to hold on to the familiar as a way of clinging to who we used to be. But from the perspective of nature and the inner logic of growth, letting go is not only necessary, it is inevitable. Stoicism does not teach us to sever ties coldly. Instead, it helps us see that everything has its time and purpose on our path. Some people come to teach us lessons in friendship, trust, or compassion. But once the lesson is complete, the relationship may no longer serve us. And if we insist on clinging to what has expired, we become the ones who suffer most. Just as a rocket must shed its boosters once they have served their purpose, our lives require similar release. The boosters are not wrong. They are essential for liftoff. But to keep them beyond their time only drags us down, adds weight, and drains energy. Old relationships, once misaligned, become resistance to our forward motion. In the process of transformation, this unfolds silently yet unmistakably. You begin to change how you think. You prioritize mental clarity over hollow amusement. You reach for books instead of scrolling, choose meditation over judgment. And in doing so, some will say you've changed, become distant, even arrogant. They are not wrong. They are simply no longer in tune with the energy you are shifting into. Some relationships were built on shared wounds. As you begin to heal and stand on your own, the bond forged through pain begins to fade. A person who once supported you in suffering may no longer be the companion you need, and in turn, your growth may unsettle them or leave them feeling left behind. That's why old ties often dissolve, not because anyone is at fault, but because the paths have diverged. The key is not to resist this process. Letting go is not betrayal. It is respect for each person's journey. When you accept that all things change, you learn to cherish what once was, without needing to hold it forever. The Stoics remind us, we cannot control others, nor should we attempt to change them. What we can control is our response. To meet change with calm, with gratitude, and without attachment. One of the clearest signs that you are evolving is when you no longer seek validation as you once did. You feel whole from within, no longer needing to be seen, understood, or approved. And that very self-sufficiency creates distance from those who knew your former self. The one who appeased, agreed, or suppressed truth for the sake of peace. They may no longer understand you. They may say you've changed too much, and at first, you may feel alone, even hollow. But if you have the patience to sit with that emptiness, you will see the space left by old relationships is room for new ones, deeper, aligned, and truly supportive. Not everyone is meant to follow you into your next chapter, and that is perfectly okay. Ultimately, this release is an act of courage. It is not the rejection of love. It is the prioritization of personal growth. When you understand your worth, you no longer fear losing what no longer fits. You won't cling to those who stay only out of habit or past roles. You will not trade inner peace for something that once mattered, but no longer does. On the Stoic path, each time you let go at the right moment, you move closer to autonomy. Each time you choose stillness over struggle with the past, you forge your will. And each time you face an empty space in your relationships and wait rather than rush to fill it, you take another step toward mastering your own life. 2. The urge to change. When inner restlessness is a call from your higher self, there are moments in life when everything around us, though still familiar and seemingly stilly, suddenly feels stuffing, dull, and lifeless. What once thrilled us now feels like repetition. Relationships that once sparked connection now feel like obligation. Even the success we once pursued no longer brings fulfillment. This is not a sign of baseless dissatisfaction. It is the voice within, urging us to change. This urge rarely comes from the outside. It is not pressure from others, not the result of worsening circumstances, nor even inspiration from someone else. It arises from a quiet void deep within, where the soul senses that the current version of self is no longer vast enough to contain the rising potential. The feeling may be vague, hard to name, yet unmistakably real. It is not loud or violent, but it makes returning to the old way of life impossible. In Stoic philosophy, change is not an abstract ideal. It is an essential part of living deliberately. Those who embody this mindset do not wait for favorable conditions to change. They notice when the mind grows restless within what once felt comfortable. That tension is not a problem. It is a signal. Just as a shoe becomes tight as the foot grows, so too does life begin to feel cramped when the self has outgrown its former frame. Many experience this restlessness without understanding it. They believe they've lost motivation, are facing a midlife crisis, or are simply bored for no reason. In truth, they are not bored. They are awakening. They are beginning to sense a new rhythm within. And if they can stay still enough to listen and brave enough to resist patching the old habits, they'll see this is the start of a profound transformation. The urge to change often arrives wrapped in uncertainty. No one knows what lies ahead. The familiar may be suffocating, but it feels safe. The new is unclear and undefined. But if we choose only safety, we deny ourselves a better version of who we could become. The one already knocking from within. Stoics do not see change as a threat, but as an opening. They believe that no one can grow while living in comfort alone, and the inner call to change is proof you are ready to step into a wider realm of growth. One common sign of this stage is that we begin to reject what once appealed to us. Shallow conversations lose their charm. Mindless entertainment grows tiring. In their place, we seek quiet, truth, and depth. We start to question our lifestyle, the true value of our pursuits. And the more we ask, the clearer it becomes. Change is inevitable. Sometimes the call to change doesn't arise from emptiness, but from a spark, a fleeting moment, a book, a phrase, a quiet afternoon is enough to open a new door. From that point on, the thought, "I can live differently," begins to take root. And once it does, it won't go away. It becomes a silent but steady pull, drawing you out of your comfort zone and into a life more real. On the path of change, what holds most people back is not difficulty, but fear of judgment. We fear that if we change, others won't recognize us. We fear that living authentically will make us seem weird, idealistic, or too much. But Stoic philosophy seeks no approval from the crowd. It seeks inner freedom, and true freedom only comes when we step beyond outdated roles and live as the person we know we're capable of becoming. The urge to change is not something to ignore. It is a sacred sign that you are standing at the threshold of maturity. It is an inner whisper of wisdom, reminding you that one chapter is complete, and it's time to turn the page. Deny it, and you remain trapped in the loop. Accept it, slowly, even vaguely, and the path ahead will begin to unfold with clarity. Change isn't always a grand leap. Sometimes it begins with small acts, declining an invitation that no longer feels meaningful, taking 10 quiet minutes each morning to breathe and reflect, or pausing when you realize you are living for someone else's expectations. These small choices, done mindfully and repeatedly, begin to free you from the old and guide you into the new, a place where you live not to please, but to be true. In moments of inner urging, what matters most is not to force an immediate answer, but not to turn away from the question. For it is these very questions that serve as doorways, leading you out of stagnation and toward a life of depth, autonomy, and a vitality unlike anything you've known before. 3. Enduring a storm of hardships. When adversity is no longer the enemy, but a silent teacher, there are seasons in life when everything seems to turn against us. Carefully laid plans unravel without warning. Opportunities slip through our fingers. Relationships break without a sign. The body grows weary, the mind drained. When hardship comes in waves, one after another in an unbroken chain, it's easy to fall into doubt. Am I on the wrong path? Or, why is everything falling apart now? Yet through the lens of Stoicism, this is not punishment. It is a trial, the final phase of an old cycle before a new one begins. These successive challenges are not meant to drag you down. They are here to test whether you are steady enough to rise to the next level. In nature, no growth occurs without strain and pressure. Just as a seed must split to sprout, the self must fracture within to give birth to a stronger version. Adversity often strikes when you are nearing a major transformation. It is the final accumulation of lessons you are meant to absorb. Stoics do not view suffering as something to avoid, but as a tool for sharpening character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is not in the way, it is the way. The challenge is the path, not something to escape, but something to confront." When failure hits again and again, illusions begin to fall away. You stop believing life will always follow your script. You're forced to adjust expectations, learn adaptability, surrender control. At first, this may leave you disoriented, but in truth, it is clearing away weak foundations to replace them with solid inner strength. Only in hardship does the truth come into sharp relief about yourself, your relationships, and what truly matters. One thing is clear: difficulty rarely strikes at random. It often appears at pivotal inner shifts, when you begin to live with intention, when you reject the wrong to pursue the right, or when you choose the quieter road instead of following the crowd. Life seems to ask, are you truly committed to this new path? Are you genuinely ready to let go of old patterns? And only when you meet these trials without losing your essence, are you worthy of entering a deeper way of living. Not everyone makes it through this stage. Some retreat, returning to the comfort of the old. Some lose faith and call the world unjust. But the Stoic sees adversity through a different lens. They don't ask, why is this happening to me? They ask, who can I become because of this? That single shift in question changes everything, from enduring to evolving. It's important to understand that adversity doesn't always roar. It can come as a stretch of inexplicable gloom, as repeated rejections, as confusion about direction, or the ache of feeling misunderstood. These persistent waits are also a form of trial. Not loud, not dramatic, but exhausting if you lack inner strength. And in this stillness, the awakened realize, now is the time to forge the will. A chain of hardships also reveals what no longer fits in your life. Shallow relationships begin to crack. Goals born of fleeting motivation lose their grip. Old habits run out of strength. When everything is pushed to the edge, only what is durable and meaningful remains. This is a refining process, not just of your outer world, but of the contents of your mind. A familiar image in Stoic thought is the bow and arrow. The more the string is drawn back, the farther and stronger the arrow flies. The trials you face may feel like you're being pulled backward, but if you remain steady, if you don't let yourself snap under pressure, the release will launch you farther than ever before. This is not a return. It is a rise to a higher plane. No breakthrough comes without a period of chaos. Before rebirth, the old self must collapse. Before light arrives, darkness deepens. Even modern psychology observes, just before a major breakthrough, emotions often grow heaviest. This doesn't mean you've lost your way. It means you're on the right path, pressing against the final boundary of your former self. If you feel surrounded by trial, if everything seems tangled and nothing is going your way, remember, this may be the final stretch before a new chapter begins. One where you are no longer ruled by emotion, no longer living for others' expectations, but moving through life with steadiness, clarity, and self-command. 4. Feeling lost and confused. When disorientation marks the start of awakening, in every life journey, there come rare moments when everything once familiar begins to feel foreign, and the goals once pursued no longer ignite inspiration. It's as if we are drifting alone on a vast ocean. No shore, no compass. The feeling is uncomfortable. It brings confusion, self-doubt, and questions about the meaning of what has been and what is. Many call this a crisis, but through the lens of Stoicism, feeling lost is not a sign of failure. It is a critical turning point in the reshaping of the inner self. It's the stage where old foundations, beliefs, ways of thinking, ways of living begin to collapse, not because they were wrong, but because they no longer fit the version of you that's quietly emerging. Confusion arises when you no longer belong to where you were, but have yet to arrive where you're going. You no longer wish to repeat old habits, but don't yet know what to replace them with. You no longer buy into society's definition of success, but haven't formed your own. It is a vague in-between, a liminal space where the old self has been left behind, but the new one is not yet born. Like a caterpillar in its cocoon, you exist between two states, no longer who you were, and not yet who you will be. This sense of being lost is more than emotional. It is biological and spiritual. When the brain realizes old behavior patterns no longer work, it begins to restate. This creates temporary disorientation, but also lays the groundwork for new neural pathways. Spiritually, you begin to resonate differently. What once seemed exciting now feels shallow, while deeper things begin to draw you in, invisibly. This is also when many begin to ask the big questions. Who am I? What do I really want? What is the purpose of life? Who am I living for? These are not easy to answer, but their very presence signals something important. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are beginning to live consciously. In Stoic philosophy, questioning the self is the first step to mastery. No one can govern their life without first examining it honestly. Confusion often lingers longer than expected. It has no fixed timeline, Some experience it for weeks, others for years. During this time, uncertainty becomes a constant companion. Each morning, you may feel like you are drifting rather than progressing. What once came naturally now feels empty. Relationships once close feel distant. And the hardest part is, you can't explain it to anyone because you don't fully understand it yourself. Yet this ambiguity is no accident. It is a total restructuring at the root, where old beliefs must fall away to make room for deeper truths. Like a house being rebuilt, its foundation must first be dismantled before a new one can rise. This stage of feeling lost is the demolition of old inner architecture, of thoughts, emotions, and worldviews. The Stoic does not fear uncertainty. On the contrary, they see it as the ideal ground to cultivate stillness and self-command. When nothing is certain, you are forced inward. You stop looking to the world for safety, for it has proven itself ever-changing. You're left with one place to stand, yourself, and that turn inward is the starting point of all lasting transformation. A clear sign of this phase is growing tired of what once excited you. Fleeting pleasures, external validation, material goals, all begin to lose their pull. You no longer crave display, competition, or conquest. Silence gains value. Solitude becomes sacred, and you begin to see the world with new eyes, slower, deeper, less reactive. Feeling lost may also bring loneliness, not because no one is around, but because you're stepping into a level of awareness few have reached. When you no longer live the old way, you no longer speak the old language. This can make connection harder, but this loneliness is not emptiness. It is the space where your truest voice can be heard. The Stoics believed, only in silence can wisdom speak. Ultimately, the feeling of being lost is a gift in disguise. It is the middle space between who you were and who you are becoming. It is not an end, but an interval, a quiet pause for reflection, release, and preparation. No one escapes this phase who truly seeks a life of depth. And once it's passed, you will never be the same. Not because the world changed, but because you did. From within. 5. Unexpected opportunities appear. When something great arrives in humble form, when a person is in the midst of transformation, whether external or internal, there come moments when life begins to quietly reveal new possibilities, not through noise, not through obvious upheaval, but through subtle, silent signs. Unexpected opportunities begin to emerge. And for those who are observant and composed, it becomes clear these things are not random. Often, in the thick of hardship or following a period of confusion, the mind tends to view everything through a negative lens. At such times, even the opportunities right before us are easy to overlook. This is because we tend to expect opportunity to arrive grandly, obvious, immediate, and dramatic. Yet in truth, the most significant shifts often begin in the smallest of ways. A chance conversation, an informal suggestion, a fleeting idea, or even a sudden inspiration while walking alone. Stoics believe opportunity is not born of luck. It is the result of preparation and awareness. When you've cultivated the inner life long enough, when you've passed through disorientation and let go of the old, you've become empty, no longer filled with old assumptions, habits, or worn-out expectations. In that state of emptiness, you begin to see what you once unconsciously ignored. Opportunity then is not something that comes from outside. It's something that's always been there, waiting for you to be ready to perceive it. One common example: someone stuck in a stagnant job suddenly gets invited by a friend to join a new project, initially a temporary venture, yet eventually a defining career shift. Or someone lost in uncertainty stumbles upon a book that completely reframes their worldview, leading to a change in how they live. These things happen more often than we imagine, but only those who remain open, unclouded by doubt or pride, are sharp enough to notice. In Stoic thought, there is no such thing as a small thing if it leads to inner transformation. Even a door barely ajar can open into an entirely new space. The real question is whether the person has the courage to walk through, because with every opportunity comes the comfort of routine, the safety of the known, or the image others have of us. That is why so many people miss these chances, not because they don't see them, but because they aren't willing to accept what they require. Unexpected opportunities rarely come wrapped in brilliance. They appear in modest forms, sometimes from those we underestimate, or within situations we deem ordinary. This too is a test, for if we judge only by appearances or cling to how we imagined opportunity should look, we easily overlook what truly holds value. The Stoic places emphasis on essence, not form. They measure an opportunity not by how it dazzles, but by how deeply it might change them from within. The arrival of an opportunity often carries a distinct feeling, not excitement, but a pause that makes you stop and reflect. It's not the call of ambition, but a whisper from within saying, this might lead to something greater. And if you act, even with one small step, you've already begun to alter your life's trajectory. Opportunity doesn't need to offer clear outcomes. Sometimes it's just the first link in a chain of unseen events. During periods of transformation, if you begin to receive more invitations, if small doors open, if certain ideas return to you again and again, pay attention. These are life signals. Not every door needs to be walked through. But if you dismiss them all as too small or bad timing, you might be closing the very gate that leads you where you're meant to go. Presence is key to recognizing opportunity. When you slow down, observe more intently, and stop reacting out of habit, you begin to notice the connections between seemingly unrelated events. You realize every person who enters your life carries a purpose. Every choice, however minor, can lead to something greater if you follow it to the end. It's this deep presence in each moment that lets you truly see what is arriving. For the awakened, surprise is no longer strange. They understand that once the inner world has changed, the outer world will begin to reflect that shift. And opportunity, no matter how it appears, is the result of countless choices, thoughts, and efforts quietly amassed. Life overlooks none of it. It simply returns the reward in subtler, more surprising ways than we expect. 6. Turning inward for growth. When inner evolution begins to emerge, one of the clearest signs that a person's life is shifting in a positive direction is when they suddenly develop a deep interest in self-development. This doesn't arise as a trend or fleeting inspiration. It comes from a genuine need, the need to become a better version of oneself in order to meet life more effectively, both outwardly and inwardly. When someone begins paying more attention to reading, meditation, journaling, physical training, learning new skills, or simply spending time alone in reflection, this is more than personal improvement. It is evidence of an inner shift. That person no longer searches for solutions outside, but turns inward to build a stable foundation at the root. And this process often begins quietly. No noise, no need for recognition. In Stoic philosophy, self-development is not a side pursuit. It is the core of the entire inner life. Those who walk this path understand we cannot control circumstance, but we can always control our response and how we prepare our inner strength. Learning, discipline, and training are not to surpass others, but to surpass ourselves, to rise above weakness, impulsivity, and laziness, that once ruled much of our behavior. This phase often follows periods of disorientation, alienation, and the letting go of misaligned relationships. As space begins to open, both in schedule and in thought, that person starts searching for something more meaningful and lasting. They lose interest in chasing the crowd. They begin to value quality over quantity, depth over attention. Habits of growth are rarely driven by pressure, but by realization that without intentional development, life has a way of dragging us into repetition and to fatigue. This journey is not easy because it requires facing oneself, facing weakness, mistakes, and unspoken shadows. Yet this courage is what distinguishes the awakening person from one still moving in autopilot. Focusing on self-growth doesn't simply mean gaining knowledge. It involves shedding the unnecessary, creating consistency in behavior, and gaining better control of emotional reactions. The Stoics believed a disciplined mind is the foundation of a steady life. So training isn't confined to books. It shows up in small daily acts, in how we respond to offense, in the words we speak to ourselves after failure. True growth often happens in silence. No fireworks, no applause, but it's steady progress. Waking up slightly earlier to meditate, writing a few lines to better understand oneself, speaking less to listen more, learning to be still in chaos. These small acts, repeated day after day, begin forming a new strength, and at some point, that person realizes they are no longer who they were a year ago, not because the world changed, but because they changed from within. It's also important to understand that focusing on self-development does not mean withdrawing from the world. On the contrary, the more clearly one understands oneself, the more deeply and compassionately one can connect with others. When the inner life is grounded, there's no longer a need to control or prove anything. One becomes calmer, more tolerant, more grounded, and this presence radiates a quiet strength that others feel in every word and action. Another sign that accompanies self-development is a shift in the definition of success. Instead of linking success to money or status, that person begins to value self-mastery, fidelity to personal values, and the ability to live in alignment with moral principles. In Stoicism, this is called living by virtue, a life of character. Regardless of external conditions, those committed to growth gradually learn to trust the processes. They stop demanding quick results. They understand that no tree grows overnight, and neither does the inner life. Each day of practice is a small step, but those steps create lasting change. They persist, not in pursuit of perfection, but out of a promise to themselves that no matter how the world shifts, they will keep growing from within. When someone starts spending more time improving themselves than watching others, when they seek truth over comfort, when they choose to learn rather than judge, that is a clear sign they are undergoing a profound transformation. And that very stage lays the foundation for every meaningful opportunity, relationship, and success yet to come. 7. Finding stillness amid chaos. When inner stability surpasses outer circumstance, there are moments in life when the outside world turns turbulent, work loses direction, finances falter, relationships grow tense, and mental health feels fragile. In such situations, most people respond with anxiety, anger, or fear. However, if someone can feel peace, even briefly, amid that chaos, it is a clear sign that a profound inner shift is underway. According to Stoicism, peace is not a state achieved when everything is in order. True peace is forged when one remains grounded, even as the world continues to shift. This state is not a denial of reality, nor is it indifference. It is the result of a mind that has learned to distinguish what is within its control from what is not. When a person enters a phase of inner development, they begin to realize they cannot control circumstances. They cannot make others behave as expected, nor prevent every misfortune. But what they can do is manage how they respond to those events. Peace arises when one stops resisting reality and starts accepting that everything has its reason for being, even if that reason is not yet understood. In Stoic philosophy, the wise are not ruled by emotion. They don't chase away sadness or fear, but accept their presence as natural parts of life's experience. When one can observe emotion without being consumed by it, they begin to step outside the constant emotional swirl. And from that distance, peace begins to grow. The feeling of calm amid chaos does not come because things are fine. It comes because one no longer needs things to be fine in order to feel secure. It is a state where the mind is no longer torn by regrets of the past or projections of the future. That person learns to be present, to focus on the now, and to do their best within their limits, without being haunted by outcomes. This presence helps them stay clear, even when others around them are in panic. A clear sign of this state is the absence of overreaction to negativity. They don't rush to judgment, don't respond impulsively, and don't cast blame. Instead, they step back, observe, and choose a measured response. They understand that emotions are signals, not commands, and choosing behavior through reason instead of impulse is one of the firmest foundations of inner peace. Peace amid chaos also reveals itself in how one treats others. Rather than argue to protect ego, they learn to listen. Rather than resist what they cannot change, they focus on changing themselves. When a person is no longer triggered by negativity around them, they become a source of steadiness, not just for themselves, but for their entire environment. It's important to emphasize that this state is not some mystical realm reserved for monks or sages. It is the practical result of training the mind and will each day. The Stoics did not believe in divine enlightenment. They believed in repetition, in small but consistent actions, and in the human capacity to self-regulate. Peace, therefore, is not a gift from outside. It is a reward from within. In modern life, as the pace accelerates and negative information becomes more overwhelming, the ability to remain calm becomes a crucial life skill. Those who can keep a quiet mind amid disruption possess a powerful advantage. They make wiser decisions, are less swayed by the crowd, and preserve the energy needed for long-term pursuits. Calm also sharpens perception. When anxiety no longer scatters attention, one begins to notice subtle signals from life, opportunities, lessons, and relationships worth keeping. That state is like a still lake. Only when the water settles can the true reflection appear. Ultimately, peace in chaos is not a final destination. It is a state, sometimes fleeting, but enough to reveal that one's history is on the right path. It signals that the mind is no longer a victim of circumstance. That person is becoming the master of their own life, not by controlling everything, but by mastering themselves. Looking back on my journey, I realized that the hardest times, the moments of feeling lost, directionless, the relationships that ended, or the string of failures were in fact the most crucial. Not because I overcame them heroically, but because they forced me to pause, turn inward, and ask, what am I really living for? Stoic philosophy gave me a framework to stay grounded during those times. When everything around me was in turmoil, I learned to return to the basics, slow my breath, write down my emotions, stop trying to fix everything at once. I trained myself to observe how I responded to small events, a criticism, a setback, a disappointment. Each time I would ask, What can I actually control? And does this reaction make me a better person? I began prioritizing inner discipline over chasing outcomes, waking up a little earlier to meditate, reading one page of a book instead of scrolling through social media, speaking more slowly when tempted to lose my temper. Each was a practice in self-mastery, bit by bit, day by day, because I believe if you can govern your inner world, no external force can govern you. Keep nurturing your awareness, resilience, and honesty with yourself. And if you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what's next. Because in the end, the peace we seek isn't out there in the world. It's the ability to remain grounded within ourselves, even as the world shifts by the day. See you in the next video.